Hello. Welcome to another edition of Sree's Sunday New York Times Read Along. My name is Neil Parekh. Our guest today is Hanson Hosein, president of the HRH Media Group. Our host, of course, is Sree Sreenivasan. Now, the interesting thing is that these guys have known each other for, oh my God, I don't know how many years. Hanson was one of Sree's first students at Columbia Journalism School. We are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. We are looking forward to today's conversation. Hanson is the director of a new documentary, American Dignity, which takes a look at both the American Civil Rights Movement and more recent protests like January 6th and the impact on voting, and takes a look at that question of where people are and that motivation to keep on marching. It's a conversation between a younger activist, a younger voting rights organizer, talking with foot soldiers from the civil rights era. We are going to really enjoy that conversation. We will, of course, watch Sree and Hanson reminisce about their days together at Columbia. Please like, comment, share, retweet, tell all your friends about the show, tag people in the comments. As I mentioned earlier, we are live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, Instagram, and our Digimentors website. And we always appreciate everyone joining us, particularly folks who are watching the replay because you're watching this opening. Thank you for taking the time to come back and watch this show. It's 8:30 a.m. Eastern Time, 5:30 a.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. in India. We are proud to be producing this in partnership with Scroll.in, one of India's most important independent news websites. Let's go ahead and see who's watching, who's joining us so far. We have Paula Kiger watching from Tallahassee, Florida. Paula is, of course, a longtime producer of the show. Thank you for your continued support, Paula. Jonathan is watching from the East Village. Jonathan, thank you, as always. And my mom, this is my weekly chance to say hi to my mom and have a little bit of time with her. I do want to reassure everyone, I do call her during the week. This is not the only time I talk to her, although I make a joke about it every now and then. Surprise, surprise. That's right, because she's in New York, Fort Lee, New Jersey. My sister is watching as well. And what's interesting is that, first of all, she's at Barnard, or I think it was Barnard for her reunion this last weekend. But she lives in Bellevue now, not far from Hanson, who's at the University of Washington. So it's a big family reunion. Ken Fisher is watching from Cedar Rapids, Iowa. Thank you, Ken, for joining us as well. Let's go ahead and bring on our host, Sree Sreenivasan. Sree, good to see you.
Good to see you, Neil. I am in LA, so it's 5:30 a.m. here. But because I've been here just for a day, I'm still on Eastern time, so this is not a big achievement for me. But our guest, Hanson, is up at 5:30 on my time zone here. So I'm extra grateful to Hanson for getting up and being with us, and also grateful to all our friends who are on this side who wake up early and are here. I'm at the home of my cousin Partna and her husband Ed. They live in Santa Clarita, which is outside of LA. And it was very interesting to be here, Neil, thinking about the fires and the effect that the fires had on this part of just all of LA. And then just also thinking about the World Cup and the Olympics that have to come here next year and then 2 years after that, and how this entire ecosystem is going to handle those commitments. It's going to be very interesting to see.
Sree, talking about the fires, I do want to ask, you said you're there visiting your cousin, right, who's a filmmaker herself. Yeah. Where do they live compared to where the fire?
Yeah, so they were not. I mean, there's so many stories of people who had the fire, a few miles away, but they were not affected, thank God. compared to other people. But the devastation and just hearing stories, everybody has stories of friends or family who lost everything in the fires. So it makes it real when you're here to be talking to people. So we want to thank everyone for joining us and for being with us and supporting the show. We do this Sundays, 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. We've been doing this for 9+ years. We read a print copy of a newspaper and talk to a fascinating guest. The show is brought to you by our friends at Muckrack. We are very grateful to them for their sponsorship. If you would like to be a sponsor, please get in touch with Neil and me. And this is, of course, produced by Digimentors. And this company of ours does digital marketing, events and programs like this. We make podcasts. We also help with PR. And we also do training and workshops. We're doing a lot of AI workshops, AI policy strategy, scenario planning. And we'd love to talk to you about that. And we are looking forward to talking to Hanson. But before we get to Hanson, Neil has the print New York Times in his home outside of DC. I wasn't able to get one here at 5:30 in the morning in LA, or even the LA Times. But let's go to Neil to show us just the headlines before we bring on Hanson.
And I will go ahead and put the paper up on.
Yeah, there we go. So you want to just tell us, starting my morning with a picture of Elon Musk, unfortunately, but let's go.
Yeah, that's not the way anyone wants to start their morning, unfortunately, but we'll have to work with it, right? So yeah, that display story is Musk on the campaign trail, drugs and family drama. So I don't know if you
I've read the story. It's it just shows how drug-addled and everything that, the drama that we know is part of his life with his 14 children and all the baby mamas and all of that stuff. This is detailed investigation by the Times, and also his drug use, which, he claimed that he uses ketamine once every couple of weeks, but here they said he was using it almost every day through stretches of while working for the government.
Yeah, it's crazy. The lead on the right-hand side, cost per Americans rise despite claims by Doge. Reversals of regulations aren't generating promised savings, analysis shows. If we get a chance, Sree, we might want to look at that article online. It's really good, well done online, but it's definitely the lead story. And just those two stories above the fold. Below the fold, you have to just a little bit to get that headline: bucolic village in the shadow of an evil past. So this is Berlin on the left-hand side. In 2011, Elmar Basson and Carolyn Frey bought a house that once belonged to a Nazi doctor in a Berlin development.
A story about a village that was built by the Nazis to be, for Nazi families, and during the horrors of that time. And now people are trying to reconcile living there. Some people were trying to get away from this, but there's a few people who are wanting folks to remember what happened there.
The story on the right-hand side, again, just to get the headline: bring your library card, and your passport too. This is the front of a library in Derby Line, Vermont, whose rear is in Quebec. So I actually read that story, Sree. There's a library and museum right on the border, and in the library they have black tape that shows where the border is. And that hasn't been an issue for 100 years. Someone actually, some philanthropist said, I want you to build a library, but I want you to put it right on the border to show how close our two countries are. And over the last 2 months, that's actually gone south, if you will. The U.S., even the Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem was there. They're actually forcing Canadians to go to a visa checkpoint to go into the library, which is just bonkers. Trump voters just want Congress to say, yes, sir. Interesting. So this must be, I'm going to guess that it's a congressional memo, but I'm assuming there must be some polling behind that.
And also the big, beautiful bill that they've been pushing.
Big, beautiful bill. The reefers on the bottom, Iran's uranium enrichment, Poland's presidential election, Russia bolsters North Korea. Conservation goal met next. This is about Maryland as being the first state to reach a pledge to preserve 30% of its land. There's a landmark climate lawsuit. There's an article about Duck Dynasty, and inspiration is ubiquitous. And then a wrong turn into a nightmare, a New York article, an accidental trip over the Peace Bridge in Buffalo typically means a toll and a loss of time, but for one asylum seeker, it carried a higher cost. So again, border issues there. I want to make sure to draw attention to the obit in Sunday's paper. It was online yesterday or the day before. If you know Loretta Swit from MASH, Hot
Yes.
Lips Houlihan.
Yeah.
I was a big fan of MASH in the day. What a great show. Dr. Baum's own research, an article in Sunday Styles, and the Can Do Decorator also in Styles. That's just a quick look at the front page. Sree, we'll take a look at the rest of the paper in just a bit. We have a couple other people who've joined us on the show. Let's go ahead and say hi to them.
Yeah, Naomi's watching from Rhode Island. Good morning. Thank you for watching. Ramnath is watching from Bangalore. Welcome. Always good to have our folks watching on the Scroll channel, Scroll.in. Everyone should check that out. Stefan is watching from New Jersey and says, good morning, wonderful, and hope everyone is well. Our former guest on this show, novelist Kaveri Madhavan, who is Irish Indian and has won a major literary prize for her novel. We're very excited for her. Congratulations. Kaveri is watching from Oslo. That's wonderful. So thank you for joining us, and thank you for being here.
You'll be in Oslo later in the year.
Yes,
right?
I'll be in Oslo to work to co-host the Nobel Peace Conference, and Neil will be working with me as we've done for the last 3 years. We're very excited about that. All right, and speaking of excitement, we are excited to have Hanson Hosein as our guest on the show. He is joining us. He's from Seattle. He's the president of HRH Media Group. He is the former founder of the Communication Leadership Graduate Program at the University of Washington. He's a filmmaker who's got an absolutely timely and important story about the civil rights movement and what's happening to it and the future of it that we'll tell you about. So lots to discuss with Hanson Hosein. Please welcome Hanson.
Hey, Sree, Neil, nice to see you both.
How are you, Hanson? Thank you for joining us. I'm up at 5:30, but I'm actually on 8:30 time in New York, but I'm in LA. I just missed you by a day. You're in Seattle. Are you usually up this early on a Sunday?
I am usually up this early every day. I mean, we'd both be better off we were in India on that time zone, right? But yeah, I am up this early. I'm coming to you live from my studio shed on my property up here just north of Seattle. So I'm just so happy to see you. I wish we could have seen each other in LA. I was there just 2 days
we just
ago.
missed each other. Yeah, and I wish I had time to go check out your film, which I could have seen on the big screen here in LA. I love the lighting and your setup there. I could see the high def camera. You look great, because Hanson has been a leader in the art of storytelling, whether it's in person, online, through movies, and has had a wonderful career. He used to be a lawyer who went to journalism school, and we've known each other for several decades when we both had hair. And
I love how you build me as one of your first students, even though I'm still 1 year older than you. I wish I could do something about that, but you're still 1 year younger than me, and much more erudite as well.
Oh no, not at all. And the program you built at the University of Washington was pioneering in so many ways. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we'll get into all the other great work you've been doing.
Well, as you know, Sree, I started out in traditional television news journalism, working for NBC News, and I made, as you did, the digital transition earlier than most people. And I started to make stories and documentaries before everybody else using these nascent social programs. And that's what led me to the University of Washington. They were looking for somebody to transform a master's program in a different way. So I remade it in that image of my moving from traditional media to something much more personal and organizational. And so that graduate program became focused on storytelling, organizational storytelling, and making sense of the world, not at the media level, but at leadership level within organizations, whether they're nonprofits or corporations. And it just happened that the iPhone had come out that year. Facebook had come out of the academic environment. So we hit critical mass, and everybody was asking me questions about what does this all mean and how do I tell stories now? Because that used to be just the preserve of Hollywood and, broadcast television and journalists. And that was a really exciting thing.
And you're just to talk a little bit about your work in the traditional media before you made the switch. You were in the Middle East. You were producing for NBC News. You were covering some of the biggest stories of that time, and including things that are happening in and around Israel. And of course, now, all these years later, those are still some of the most important stories. What did you learn? What are some of the memories you have of covering that part of the world?
Yeah, so I was after working for NBC Nightly News for 3.5 years in New York. I asked to be sent overseas, and I have a British passport, and I assumed they'd send me to London, which is the main place to cover international. But they said, "Well, you're a bit young, naive, as well as arrogant. Let's try Israel with your last name Hossein and see how that works out." And so I was based in Tel Aviv for 4 years, covering both the Middle East as well as the war in the Balkans and Kosovo and Bosnia. And so for me, and this is where my work today still is relevant, is that I was compelled to make sense of what's happening in chaos on the front lines. On the front lines there of war, but now we're on the front lines of change, transformation, and turbulence. And so even through my company today, I say that's what I do. I look at narrative shifts on the front lines of that kind of chaos. And so for me to cover the Middle East, to speak to Israeli prime ministers, to speak to Palestinians, to engage with Hezbollah in Lebanon, to cover the war in Iraq a few years later, so I just really wanted to be somebody who was making sense of that, seeing it firsthand, and being able to tell those stories in different ways. And I love the fact that I could ultimately move away from what we call that voice of God type broadcast television news, working for NBC, to something much more personal and thoughtful, and something that you yourself, Sree, have been doing for years. And so that was very important to me. But to be able to be there and to engage with these people in this time of stress and anxiety, and also looking for very positive stories at the same time, was really what inspired me and compelled me to do this work for so long.
Yeah, and it's so great that you were at that, at that right moment as technology changed as well. One of the things that we did when we were at Columbia together, we were moving from what was called 3/4-inch tape with the giant camera, the separate unit where the tape recorder was, to high 8 videotape, and you were able to shoot kind of just a smaller camera, like about this size, and you're able to be more mobile and just get out there and just be more, just not show up with a whole crew. That was an important tech change. But then came the internet and everything else that followed. So how did the internet affect how you told stories and how you helped your students and your clients?
Well, I still remember at Columbia University running around New York City with that big deck, on the subway trying to capture those stories. But I also love that freedom. And when I worked at NBC News, I started to resent having to work in those large crews, because we'd have to go 4 people to go cover a war, and it was $100,000 at least out the door. And I began to notice younger people, or people my age, doing so with their own small setups. And I said, I want to do more of that and less of the entourage. And that's translated to what happened when the internet did come out, and especially the mobile internet. And to be able to tell students you are now free. And it's not just free in terms of the technology, but free in terms of the narrative, that it became much more personalized, that you didn't necessarily have to follow the rules of what you saw and emulated on, say, television news. That really opened up a whole world. And a lot of my students were working at places like Starbucks and Amazon and Microsoft. And so they said, I need to, whatever I'm learning in the class tonight, I'm going to take tomorrow and speak to my boss and say, can we start telling stories in a way that PR and legal would not originally let us do. And so that was liberating for them as well. And the organizations then came to me and said, "Hey, can you consult with our CEOs and help us figure out how to do these kinds of stories so that we can engage directly?" And so, as we know, that's cutting out the middleman or the gatekeepers that kept so many journalists in business, which was devastating from an economic point of view. But it also allowed organizations to directly speak in a truthful way about the things that matter to them. So that's something we definitely helped innovate around at the University of Washington, which led me to engage with clients around the country and ultimately around the world around this notion of storytelling at the organizational level.
Amazing. We have people watching from around the world. Here is Tennis Ma'am watching from Cedar Park in Texas. John Lee's watching from New York and says hello to all of us, including Kaveri in Oslo. Pradnya, former guest, and John is a former guest on our show. Pradnya is watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. And look what Pradnya is doing. She's tagging her friends so that they can watch live or later. And we're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn. So any of those channels that you like. Here's a regular viewer of our show who gets up at 5:30 a.m. in the Bay Area to watch us. Hi, Diana. I am usually in New York, but I'm in LA today. So I'm in your time zone, Diana, but I'm still on New York time. And Ronald is watching. Ron Thomas, our friend, is watching from Verona, but just arrived from Dubai. He's usually watching from Dubai or wherever he's in the world. But welcome back, Ron, and great to have you here. And he calls this show a master class. And we always learn a lot from our guests. And we want to talk to Hanson about his documentary that he's made. And we want to set that up. And we're going to show also a clip from the trailer, which is about 1:45, and it's called American Dignity, and you can watch in Los Angeles till June 4th. The New York City premiere is June 20th, and when you can watch it 21st to the 24th, and you can go to our website at digimentors.group/NYT readalong, and there you can find Hanson's episode and you can see more there. But set this up for us, and then we'll play the trailer.
Yeah, and I hope ultimately that this will be available on streaming once we're done with these two separate screenings, because ultimately I want to submit to the Oscars for consideration, but it has to screen first of all in one of these major markets for a week. And so I'm waiting for the New York
Those are the
Times
rules of the Academy that they
exactly the rules of the Academy. Once it's done once that LA run is over, I can put it online. But what I really want to do is I've submitted to both the New York Times and the Guardian that have documentary channels, and I would love for one of those organizations to have it, and then we can really make it available publicly as long as possible. And so ultimately, I just want to say for the last few years, I've been spending a lot of time in Alabama, especially in Selma, working with organizations there on the ground and an organization here in Seattle to try to make sense of the civil rights movement for new generations, even as they put more infrastructure into Selma, which is such a historic place. In 1965, the people there really helped compel the Johnson administration to pass the Voting Rights Act, and that has been under assault ever since. And so in the context of Bloody Sunday, which was 60 years ago, that we hope that as a civil rights story still carries some kind of relevance today, as well as the 47th president coming to power in January, I wanted to ask myself two questions. A, does the civil rights movement still have credibility and relevance given where this country is going? And for another organization that's on the ground called Common Power, this leader who goes door to door to get people to register to vote, he was convinced that the outcome of the presidential election in November was going to go a different way. And so I wanted to ask these two men who just coincidentally have to be named Charles Douglas of Common Power, and Charles Malden, who was 17 when he marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma in 65. Where do we go from here? And so I had two very powerful set pieces in real time that I could use to tell the story. First, there was going to be the first election in Virginia since the presidential election where Charles Douglas would be going door to door to engage with people. And then we had the inauguration that I was determined to go to in Washington, D.C., to be among all these people who had supported Donald Trump and see how I felt about what had motivated them and whether I could sort of make sense, once again, on the front lines, as I used to do at NBC News, with people I didn't vote for him, but I wanted to see what this meant for me, what it meant for the country, and could I connect to these people? And so that's what ultimately the film is about. It's connecting the past with the present and understanding how do we lead in this moment with two men who have been really also on the front lines of this, and wondering how they're going to find a way forward because things aren't working out the way they thought it would.
Wow, that's very powerful. Let's take a look at the trailer of the film. It's about 1:45.
Crossing the bridge is not just walking up to the apex. It's continuing after, because when you guys saw, when you crested this apex, when you actually saw what was there, you kept going.
There was no turning around. There was only one way to go, and that was straight.
There you go. Okay. People who aren't known to those in power aren't directly controlled by those in power. That they actually, if enough of them get together, they can make decisions that are different than the people who are in power. That's why it rises to the level of possible violence, because it is dangerous to those in power.
Nonviolent children soldiers is what we were. One day being beat on the bridge, and the next day seeing 25,000 people in support of what was most right and what was best about America. Although we were poor people, we were very proud people. We had dignity, and our dignity was put on the line.
Out of a mountain of despair. That's about right. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and the inauguration of the 47th President of the United States. It's gotta be what your ideal is, and it's gotta be what you can get right now. That's what it's like to live in this country and to be a human being. Yes, sir.
Wow, that's amazing. And look what Amy says. This looks amazing. That's so powerful, so timely, and so important, that moment that not everyone would recognize, where he goes to the MLK memorial, which is only open in the last decade or so, and he reads that first part of that sentence that's engraved there: out of a mountain of despair, a stone of hope. That's the second part of that. What was that like to be there?
It was daunting for Charles Douglas, especially, whose father was a Black Panther. He was discouraged by the momentousness of the day, both being MLK Day as well as the inauguration of Donald Trump. And all the people obviously were congregated around the Capitol. There's very few people around the MLK monument. I'm amazed, by the way, Sree, that you know that saying so well on the side of that monument. But it was incredible. And because of my background, as we mentioned at NBC, and becoming the storyteller, I shot and edited this entire thing very quickly. So it was freezing cold on that day. And I'm listening to the audio with my headphones on and trying to engage with Charles Douglas there. And you could see the heaviness and feel the heaviness of the day and the emotion. Most of the people in the city that day were very excited. They were very happy. And you can hear that with some of the MAGA supporters. And then you have Charles Douglas thinking, I've got to talk to these people. And I'm a person of color, and I don't know how I feel about this. And so for me, it was very much like being back in the Middle East. I've been in Iraq, I've been in Syria, I've been in Lebanon, I've been in Israel, I've been in Gaza, and to feel a certain sense of I'm a fish out of water, maybe a little bit of danger, but also I want to connect in a relevant, thoughtful way to these people, and with respect, even though if I don't necessarily agree with them. I love that. I love being on the front lines that way. So I enjoyed it, and to be able to turn it around almost like a breaking news documentary as quickly as he did in time for the 60th anniversary of Bloody Sunday in Selma was also really motivating for me.
And for folks who are just joining us, this is Hanson Hosein in Seattle. I'm Sree Sreenivasan in New York. Usually in New York, but I'm in LA today. And we're going to now invite Neil to come back and show some connections. He and Hanson, who hadn't met till recently, were actually in and around some of the same events marking some of these important anniversaries. And thanks to our work with a couple of major civil rights organizations, we have had a chance to help these organizations tell their stories. So Neil, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Sree. Primarily the work that I've been doing with the John and Lillian Miles Lewis Foundation. I was actually just in Atlanta this week for their gala dinner, their Good Trouble Gala. I flew back early on Saturday morning. But this is a picture of Hanson at the 60th anniversary celebration, Selma Jubilee, in Selma, Alabama. So you can see he's kind of a little bit further back from the crowd. What you see in terms of the backs of the people, that's the back of the media. And if you squint, you can just barely see the metal barricades that actually separated the media from the front row of the marchers before. This is Hanson. This was before things started, right? You remember?
That's right. Yeah, and there was tens of thousands of people behind that barricades, and we're just the foot of the Edmund Pettus Bridge right there.
Yes.
And you're about to all start marching towards me, and me being the consummate journalist want to be there as you come at me.
Absolutely. And so almost at about the same time, I took this picture further in to the crowd. So you can see a couple of journalists. The folks in the blue hats are brothers from Phi Beta Sigma fraternity. They were helping to keep things a little bit organized. And I say a little bit because it was pretty chaotic. But I was there with the John Lewis Foundation, John Little Miles Lewis Foundation. Our CEO was in the front row up there, and I was taking photographs. I'll show some of that in a little bit. But not only were we both there in Selma, and I have to say, when now I had met Hanson before, and this goes back. We talked about Sree and Hanson knowing each other from Columbia Journalism School. I lived in Seattle for 15 years, and I came to a workshop that Sree had a social media one night stand that Hanson had organized at the University of Washington back in 2013. This was just before my daughter was born back in that year, but I remember that night very well. But we, just in passing. But what was interesting is that if you look at the other pictures I have, this is Charles Malden, who Hanson referenced in the documentary. The two Charleses, that are having that conversation with the CEO of the John Lewis Foundation, Deetra Everson. This picture was taken at the Foot Soldiers breakfast on the day before the celebration. And I thought that was interesting. This is a picture I took with Kirk Harrington, who's also in the documentary, sitting on the sofa with Charles. Dr. Verdell Dawson is in the middle, and Roosevelt Goldsby is over my left shoulder. Kirk was 14, Roosevelt was 17. I don't remember, I didn't do the math on Dr. Dawson's age, but somewhere in that range. They were on the bridge with John Lewis and Charles Malden that day. So it's pretty incredible to know that Hanson and I we have such kind of close connections to that area. This is the shot that I got. So this is where I was standing in the march getting my pictures and video. And this is a picture of the foot soldiers. Dr. Lafayette, who Hanson, just a legend in the movement. Tell us a little bit more about your connection with Selma and the foot soldiers and that historical part. How long have you been working with folks down there?
I've been going down there for about 3 years now. I've been to Selma about 15 or 16 times. And specifically, what's so interesting about all this, especially tied to your work and Sree's work, is that, traditionally we have looked back upon the story of Selma and the Voting Rights Act being passed as what they call the big man theory of history, that it was all Martin Luther King helping to make that change and convince Lyndon Johnson and Congress to pass the Voting Rights Act in 1965. But what is much more compelling today, especially with social media and grassroots change, is that for years before, especially helped by Dr. Bernard Lafayette, that everyday citizens on the ground in Selma were so indignant about how their rights are being taken away from them that they want to rise up in a dignified way. So this is why the title is called American Dignity, to exert and express their democratic rights. And so you have these teenagers, these people the same age as my kids today, putting themselves in bodily harm, but in a peaceful way, to demand the rights that everybody has for their parents, for the adults in their life who can actually vote. And so these foot soldiers are really powerful people in history who have not been recognized traditionally. And so this notion of foot soldiers, and there's a foot soldiers park now in Selma, and helping them bring that story to life so that when people do come to Selma, which is not an easy trip to make, and they all want to do the crossing of the bridge for an hour and leave, can we
Yeah.
create something that's much more relational? Can we tell history better and more thoroughly? And can we recognize these young people who did so much to change not just the country, but also the world and thinking about democracy? And so my work with them has been about using technology for storytelling. It's about thinking about how to tell stories differently. It's about how to create that sense of place in a town that is quite impoverished, one of the poorest towns in Alabama and the United States, that has not received its just due, that it is the Gettysburg of civil rights from a historical conflict point of view that has not been seen that way. And what do we do from a storytelling point of view? What do we do from a technology infrastructure point of view? And what do we do from a historical point of view to recognize these people? So I've been working with them very directly over the last 3 years to think that through and strategically put it out there.
And it's interesting you should talk about the age of the protesters. These were all 14, not all of them certainly, but they were very young, as young as 14 up to 17. You know, John Lewis himself was
He was in the early 20s, I think.
23, 22 years old or so, and early 20s. I guess it would have been 1965, so 25 years old. He was on the older side in that case. What's interesting is I want to tie it to a conversation we had just recently with Stephen Bradley, who is a professor at Amherst College. He wrote a book, If We Don't Get It, about a people's history of Ferguson. And he really centered the young Black activists that led that movement. And he drew his own parallels between Ferguson and Selma, that it was young people at the forefront, young Black people really leading the way. And one of the pictures we showed on that show is this picture of, and I'll bring it up in just a moment, this picture of protesters in Ferguson. Again, young, in this case, young Black men. It's that that thread through history. Now, what's interesting, if you contrast that, obviously the January 6th uprising was not young Black people. But it was also not just predominantly white, but they were older. It was an older crowd, right?
It was I think it was largely an older crowd. And in the film, I draw parallels between the violence of Bloody Sunday in March 1965. And I juxtapose that footage with footage that I took from a congressional investigation website from the insurrection from January 6th, which no longer exists, by the way. The website's been taken down, and to find that footage is very hard. So I'm glad that I was able to include it and archive it in the film. But there is a parallel between Bloody Sunday and January 6th in that we've got a sort of the traditional power base of America that is trying to hold on to power when it feels like somebody else is trying to take it away from them, perhaps, and they see it as unjustly. And so we talk about Black African Americans in the South wanting their voting rights. So that feels like they're taking away our power. And then you've got people who supported Donald Trump saying, well, that election was illegitimate, and we're going to use violence yet again to make sure that we hold on to power. And so those are the parallels that when people feel very threatened, people especially who have had power traditionally, they will resort to violence. And that's what happened in 2 occasions in American history.
We have a great question from Ramnath, who's watching on Facebook. Fascinating to listen to Hanson, and I completely agree. Here's a question. What was the biggest challenge in capturing the spirit of social movements on film, especially when linking the past and the present?
That's a great question, because one of my challenges is that you don't want to hear the same stories over and over, the usual suspects, and saying, oh, this is what it was like 60 years ago, that you really want to try to connect it to the present. And so one of the most powerful parts of the film is in the middle, where we engage with some of the foot soldiers that you know so well, Neil. And it's not me interviewing them. I asked Charles Malden, who's one of
Yes.
their kind, to actually connect to them and talk to them. And what was so powerful about this, it wasn't really about, oh, let's hear that story again of what it was like 60 years ago. In a way, it was almost like a PTSD therapy session, that these people had not had a chance to truly share their stories for 60 years, and so much of it has been bottled up inside them. And what Charles Malden has discovered over the last couple of years in working with Charles Douglas to be able to work with people coming in to do pilgrimages around civil rights, that it actually helps to talk about what they went through. And it's always emotional, and they always cry, because when you're that age, confronting state police and the Ku Klux Klan who are just waiting for you on the other side of the bridge, you don't get rid of that out of your system anytime soon. And so it was really about giving these everyday heroes an opportunity to reflect upon what they had gone through on behalf of their families, and to talk about it 60 years later when they haven't had that chance, and to feel that release. And to me, that was the emotional truth of the film. Yes, there's cerebral things around voting rights and what's going on right now in the country, but to allow these people motivated by family to do such amazing things, then to reflect upon it and to make sense of it for themselves, that's what really, I think, came through as the authenticity of the film and of these particular heroes, really.
They talked about how they're still recuperating from the, physical, but also the emotional blows that they received that day, and not really just that day, but throughout that time period. Kirk told me about how the cops used to hit them with cattle prods, when they were attacking them. This is Kirk on the right hand side in the Selma sweatshirt. He was on the sofa with Charles Malden in your documentary, and there was another woman, I forget her name, who talked about being hit by the police. John Lewis, in fact, this is what, if you go back to that idea of the great man theory and the focus on these individuals, a lot of attention obviously has been paid to Martin Luther King and John Lewis, but these are the people that we are trying to uplift and center and kind of put back in the focus of history, not to take anything away, of course, from the work that John Lewis and Martin Luther King, Hosea Williams, and others did. But it's not just the physical blows. John Lewis, it affected his speech after Bloody Sunday. He spoke with just a slight lisp for the rest of his life, but it's the emotional scars that are still incredible. And I think what's really interesting, though, to see, and you saw this at the breakfast that we were at, there was also a lot of joy. The particularly to see the class of, I think it was 68, Roosevelt Goldsby and his peers could still celebrate and could still, kind of, yes, this happened, and yes, this was horrible and traumatic, but they could also celebrate all the gains that they've made and all the progress. There is, I think, a lot of frustration, and we talk about it on the show a lot in terms of where we are with Trump and Musk and all the, it's very frustrating. And I know Mary C. Curtis is watching from LaGuardia on her way back to Charlotte, but she's a journalist herself and a former guest. Do you know Mary Hanson? Or
I do not, but I'm so glad to see that. I'm happy that she's watching. That's great.
Yeah, no, she's the columnist for CQ Roll Call and does a podcast, Equal Time, if I'm not mistaken. And she and others, we often talk about everything that is all the steps we're taking backward, right, in the last 6 months. But think about the incredible progress that we've made in the last 60 years.
Yeah, it's no. That's it. First of all, Black America has given us, this country, democracy, the world, so much, and from the pain of their bodies and from the indignant experiences they've had to suffer through. And that's what we have to remember, that it wasn't just, I mean, Charles Malden called himself and his colleagues child soldiers on that day, but it wasn't just the violence of that day. It's having had to live through the indignancy of Jim Crow and know that
Yeah.
if you go into a store that they're going to look at you funny or not serve you, and that you had to walk in a different way on the street. And to feel that all compounded with you on that day and then suffer through that violence, that is a lot, especially for a teenager to go through. And so it's really important to understand, if you think about yourself today and or your children, wondering how do you live through that kind of stress and pressure, and to come out of it in a jubilant way, as you say, Neil, and to be able to celebrate it as they do at the Foot Soldiers Breakfast. That is remarkable. It's heroic. And it's really, for me, it's leadership that we should be taking today and applying to this moment. That even as you're crossing that bridge, knowing you're going into some kind of uncertain chaos, turbulence, and violence, you still keep going because you know you're doing on behalf of your family and your community, and we have to keep going forward.
Naomi says that's
that's so well put. I wanted to step in to say that
of course.
Here we are, three South Asian men talking about civil rights and the history. And one of the failures, I think, of the South Asian community has been that we didn't do a good job of educating folks about the history of civil rights in America, that we're here on the backs of Black folks and Latino folks who did the work, who fought for rights that then we enjoy. And we see a lot of South Asians, East Asians, and others who will talk about, when they look at America, they will talk about taxes and other issues, not understanding the role that civil rights played. And that's partly because the history that of the immigration patterns, if you studied up to college in India, you wouldn't learn American civics or civil rights, the story of any of that. And then you come here, you go to grad school, and then you have very successful careers, if you do, on Wall Street or whatever. And then you meet these folks who have the time, the energy, the money to support civil rights issues, and they don't, many of them, because they don't know, that this all came to us because Black folks and others fought so hard to make it possible for other immigrants to come and be successful in ways that would not have been possible.
That's such a powerful observation, Sree. I mean, the three of us probably wouldn't be here today in America had it not been for John Lewis and these foot soldiers in Selma fighting for, not just for their rights, but for everybody else's rights. And today, that's a history that either people want to ignore or they actually want to do away with, because certain people in this country don't want to look at the negative side of America, even though that's what makes America so strong. It's both the negative and the positive of that history.
Yeah, and this push away from DEI is really, really disturbing to see that, that it's, along with CRT and these other words, which have all become kind of four-letter words, these three-letter acronyms that have become four-letter words. It's just so sad to see where we are at the moment. We have some great comments coming in and people watching, including Dr. Tachi, who's been a guest on this show, watching from Fort Lauderdale. And Pradnya says that, I'll be honest, seeing these images makes me even more sad about the current state of things. And that's why that history is so important. Sudha says, Hanson, great work you're contributing to keeping history alive of the civil rights movement. And that's so great. And Pradnya says, we have to acknowledge the privilege of being the right kind of brown. And I think that's something that we don't understand or talk about enough. Neil?
There are a couple of things to just build off of that. One is the Pradnya's comment, actually, I'll start with that, the right kind of brown. I do want to acknowledge that we're not always the right kind of brown. In a lot of communities, and I'll know from my own upbringing, one of privilege, I did not experience the same kind of impact that people who are Black. Talking with folks just the other day, like in my family, we never had to have the conversation about what to do if you're pulled over by the police, right? We never confronted that. But other people I know in the South, other Indians, did have to face that. there are certain communities. It's really interesting to me that friends of mine, some people talk about how there were black proms and white proms in their high schools. And in some communities, the Indians, the South Asians gravitated toward the black prom. And that's how they were grouped socially with everything that comes with that. And in other communities, they went to the white prom, right? And that's how they were grouped socially. So that's an interesting kind of dynamic. The one other thing I want to mention, though, Hanson, you talked about the impact on this generation of people, the foot soldiers. We talked about the indignities that they lived through Jim Crow, and then obviously the civil rights movement and the police beatings, et cetera. There are still people. There's still a lot of places where blacks are given, extra scrutiny when they walk into a store, when they are, walking on the street, when police are stopping them for unnecessary reasons. So that trauma, that experience has not completely gone away. It's certainly better than it was in the 60s. But for a lot of people, that's still very recent. And I'm proud to say, Sree, that, on this show, we have had conversations. I mentioned Stephen Bradley earlier. I go back to the conversation we had with Sonny Slaughter about the 1619 Project. Our friend Walter Grayson has talked with us a lot about this. This is a theme that we've visited time and time again. And again, your point about these brown people talking about civil rights and the issues of concern to every American, I think says a lot about the country that we're in.
Sure. Here's a comment. Reading The Sword and the Shield by Peniel Joseph. Chapter details MLK meeting Jawaharlal Nehru, the Prime Minister of India then, during his trip in India in the late 1950s. Malcolm X visited some months later, and that influence of India, of Mahatma Gandhi on the work of the civil rights movement is also important, and that's been talked about a lot. Folks, this is the New York Times Read Along, and in a couple of minutes, we're going to take a look at the paper. Neil's going to flip through it, and Hanson and I are going to comment on the paper. And we're talking about American Dignity, the short documentary, about a 20-minute film that Hanson has made. It's premiering in New York on June 20th, and will run for a week there. It's right now in LA till June 4th. And because they're now will have run in these two cities, then it can qualify and be part of the process for the Academy for Oscar consideration, all of that. That's down the line. But right now, we want everyone to know about American Dignity. Check out the trailer. Check out links to buying tickets at our website at digimentors.group. And Hanson, tell us a little bit about what we mentioned a little. We mentioned it, the folks who were unhappy January 6th of 2021, and the people who you were with who are unhappy about the results of the 2024 election, and you were there you were there this January 2025, talking to folks. What did you learn about the difference in how the people who felt disenfranchised or upset about the results and how they reacted?
Well, first of all, I was determined to go to inauguration, whether or not I was doing this film. And we didn't get the green light for the film until December 31st. So it was really touch and go. But for me, as a former journalist, maybe during the first administration of Trump's administration, I put my head in the sand and said, okay, we just have to survive this and push back. This time I said, I've got to see what this really is about, because I know it's going to affect us differently. So I got tickets for inauguration before I knew I was doing the film. And to circulate among those people for 2 days in Washington, D.C. was a really important thing for me. And I didn't feel a sense of threat. I felt I was able to speak to them. There was a lot of respect going either way, even though they may or may not know what my particular inclinations were. But what I found is that their motivations were not what you might expect. I think a lot of these people were hoping for a change politically and economically in the country, and they were motivated to do so on behalf of their families. And so in the film, when Charles Douglas from Common Power is speaking directly to these people who've got the red hats, and he's a person of color, an African-American man, connecting to them, there is an incredible amount of respect between the two of them. They're listening to each other. They recognize that they want the same thing for their families. They're just getting there in a different way. And the great takeaway from all of this is that these people may be inclined to go in a different direction if the world changes in a way that doesn't satisfy anyone. And so ultimately, this is where I see the documentary going, is that if we're not happy with what Trump is doing to the country, if it's affecting everybody, regardless of who supported and who didn't, is there a way to say, you know what, we can come together once again as a country to figure a way through this? If this actually is a historical pivot for the country, one way or the other, and we've got to come out on the other side of the bridge. And we can talk to these people, even though we didn't see eye to eye with them. And that's where I see the great hope with both the film and what I saw on Inauguration Day, that I can talk to these people can talk to me. I didn't feel threatened. They didn't feel threatened. There is a way forward if we have that opportunity.
One of Malcolm X's points about Black lives in the US was about Black dignity. I'm very curious about this film, American Dignity. I was asking about where it'll be shown in New York.
It's going to be shown at the Cinema Village in Greenwich Village. I'm thrilled about that because I love independent movie theaters. So it's playing for 7 days there. I'll be there on January 20th, actually, for the premiere, as will
June
Charles
20th.
Douglas.
June
20th. I'm thinking about the inauguration again. But June 20th with Charles Douglas from Common Power, and we'll be doing a Q&A there. And so please do come so that we can talk to you more about the film. It's crazy that people will actually pay to go see a 20-minute film in a movie theater. And so we want to give a bit more value in engaging with us. But I also think that I could have made this an hour-and-a-half film, but we said everything we wanted to say in the equivalent of a vinyl album side of being a classic rock and jazz guy. And so why not tell the story in what was a very condensed but intense period for us as we were trying to make sense of that.
Dr. Tachi, who's down in Florida, is asking about touring with the film.
That's a great idea. I think we will do that. I want to definitely, as soon as we're liberated from LA, I want to make this available as widely as possible. Because I did teach leadership and communication for 10, 15 years at the University of Washington. This is a lesson in leadership ultimately. And it's a lesson in leadership today. It's not just for African Americans, it's for all Americans to think about how we can connect and rebuild, because we're going to have to rebuild when this is all over. And it's the fact that we can see eye to eye and think differently about uncertainty and chaos is really what this is about.
Amy's asking when it'll be shown in Seattle.
It's already screened twice. It's screened twice in Seattle. I'll speak to folks here to try to get that done again soon.
And our friend, I don't know the name here, but says, I just work a few blocks away and I'm also jazz and classic rock guy. I'm
in my studio shed here, surrounded by hundreds and thousands of albums that I own. So I'm with you there.
Yeah. And Pradya says, come to DC.
Yes. I'm actually, I definitely want to see, we see us bring it to Atlanta. We've already talked about, how we can have the John and Lily Miles Lewis Foundation, work with Hanson, because this is a story that we want to be told as well. And this is one of the 4 pillars of the work that we do, preserving and promoting civil rights history. It falls right in line with that. So we will be, we'll be figuring stuff out, and I'm sure it will both be in Selma at some point.
Yeah, and in fact, if I was going to think about next steps of this beyond what I was just saying from a philosophical point of view, given what you do at Digimentors and what I do with my own company, ideally, I would like to create a new media initiative that is centered in the South, both in Selma and Atlanta, that really looks at how do we take this leadership framework and create a media company or a media initiative around it to tell those stories from the heart of it on a regular basis. So to me, that would be an ideal next step, and Atlanta is such a perfect place to do this.
Sign me up.
The tagline is, would you keep marching? So let's talk about that, and then let's go to the newspaper. We want to cover what's happening in the news. So talk about how you landed on that as the tagline.
It's fundamentally, how do we connect the past with the present? Those young people who kept marching across the bridge despite the violence that they ultimately saw was facing them, did it anyway. And that's what made all the difference. That narrative, it is a narrative tension that really inspired Congress and the president to pass that legislation. And today, for us, where our situations are so different, where we are more comfortable, as much as it feels like things are fraught with uncertainty. Will we step up now and keep marching into what is uncertainty, not just politically, but economically and technologically, given the work we know about AI, right? And so we have to keep marching. If we say, you know what, let's step back and let somebody else take care of this, there's nobody else. It's us. And so we have to be inspired by these everyday people, these young people, these teenagers who put everything on the line for themselves, their family, their community to change the world. We have to do the same thing now. There's similarities between the two historical moments.
All right, folks, we have about 30 minutes left with Hanson, less than that. So let's get to the newspaper. Neil is going to show the newspaper, and then we're going to react to what's in there. I want to ask Hanson, when was the last time you picked up a print copy of any newspaper?
It's been a long time. And in fact, I used to be religious about both the New York Times and the Economist, and I don't do it as much anymore. I actually prefer the raw information coming into me and making sense of it myself. So I occasionally pick up the Wall Street Journal that comes to my house, but it's not New York Times. Unlike living in New York, where you all do and get it on a Sunday on a regular basis, that's not me anymore, sadly.
Yeah. So let's just look at the front page. This is a big story about Elon Musk and what he's been doing in the last few months. In fact, both the stories are connected to Musk. One is about his personal problems as well as his drug use while working in the administration, and then the work that he did in the administration. So much devastation, Hanson, as you know, the impact of cutting USAID, of just going after government employees. There is lots to be said about problems in the US government and efficiency. We're all for that. But in a system that is about double checking and checks and balances and having deep discussions, you know how American government works, right? At the local level, there are things that you can't do, even simple things, without having like a comment period and the public getting involved. And here, just with the stroke of a pen, eliminating jobs of hundreds of thousands of people has been something that they have done.
It's profoundly undemocratic. I was actually a USAID subcontractor after I finished my first film, and I was in Southern Africa telling stories about what was going on there and how the U.S. government was playing such a positive role in terms of business development and working with countries that were dealing with AIDS. And to see that soft power being exercised in such a positive way, and then to have it ripped out so unceremoniously and so undemocratically in the last few months is really devastating, not just to the people in that region, but also in terms of what it represents for America and the American story being told.
Yeah, that
Hanson,
idea of soft
power. Sorry about that, Sree. I also worked with a USAID project in Egypt for 2 years, so I 100% agree with what you said. It was just horrible to see what they were doing. Much less.
You remember Karen Hughes was in
Voice of America.
Yeah, in George W. Bush's administration, they talked about the public diplomacy, soft power, all of that. We used to make fun of some of that because of the hearts and minds stuff that while also bombing these people, right, in Iraq and Afghanistan. But now it's completely different. It's kind of hard to believe they all belong to the same political party when in fact it's the Republicans and MAGA are two almost different things. You're up to the arts and leisure cover. What's on the cover? Yeah, walk us through it.
I figured we'd just walk through the rest of the paper quickly and then go back to the front page.
Sure.
Arts and leisure is the headline: Same Family Changed Nation. The hit this is about Duck Dynasty. The hit reality comedy series was a precursor for the conservative identity politics that swept in after it. What we were just talking about. It's back, and of course, the patriarch of the family just passed away right before it's coming back. So it's going to be interesting to see how they work.
Duck Dynasty is now in the White House. That's the difference. It was like this strange thing you looked at on TV, and now they're running our lives.
And it was reality TV that changed the White House as well. I mean, it wasn't for The Apprentice and NBC and Jeff Zucker of NBC, Donald Trump would not have received that publicity boost that really put him in that high profile to become president.
Full circle moment. We talked about Elon Musk. At the bottom of this, the big display story, what's next? Elon Musk's long-term thoughts are fueled by a techno-futuristic philosophy. And that's what is the lead article in Sunday Business. Goodbye, Washington. Hello, Mars. Is Musk going to Mars? That'd be great. Is he going next week, maybe?
If you would just go and stay there, that would be great, yeah.
Elon Musk is back to thinking about the existential fate of humanity. Wow. To go from where he was buying the election for what, $275 million, Doge for 4 or 5 months, and now he's back to thinking about the existential fate of humanity. And that's this is the cover.
That's something I was saying leading up to the election in November, that whoever won, this was the end game. Because it wasn't just going to change America politically, but because of the decisions we'll be making about AI, it's going to lock down whatever discourse America wants to have out there for the foreseeable future. And so to have these technocrats and these tech bros connecting to what's going on in the White House is going to seal the deal for the foreseeable future in terms of how we connect, the things that we say and how we say them, which is profoundly disconcerting.
And if you take one step back on Elon Musk, his efforts to, with the electric vehicle with Tesla, which was a good idea, right? And a good thing to have more electric vehicles, by then focusing his energy on Mars, when instead of trying to save the planet that's here, is an important problem. And his entire support and political money, will, energy being put into people who are doing all they can to not save the earth, right? All kind of anti-environmental policies and measures. That was the fundamental contradiction and the lie in his story. Pradnya says Doge is now coming for nonprofits in a big way, and that's really scary to think about.
Yeah, I'm connected to so many nonprofits here in Seattle. And it's amazing also to see all the bumper stickers on Teslas here who are trying to make sure they didn't get vandalized. But then the nonprofit leaders that I work with here in Seattle know that their tax-based status might be threatened, or that their funding, whether they're a radio station, is also threatened. So business models at the universities and the nonprofits are changing in real time now, because people recognize they can no longer rely on the support of the federal government. It's really a moment.
And this attack on international students, they've stopped doing visa interviews. It's not just Harvard has 30% international students. A lot of red states where they have big research universities are filled with international students. Places like the University of Alabama, Michigan, like Indiana, all of these places have lots and lots of international students, and they're going to suffer financially. Neil, keep going.
Sunday opinion. I didn't want to interrupt the conversation, Sree, but Jonathan says nonprofit arts groups are particularly hard hit. Absolutely. The Sunday opinion, the cover is The Vanishing American Family, Why the Therapy Generation is Taking a Pass on Parenting. That's interesting. I'm really curious about where they're going with that, Sree, because I know
what does that mean? I don't understand what that means.
Well, I mean, my assumption is that they're making a comment about Gen Xers who are more, or even younger people are more open about talking about therapy, about mental health, but that they are not as active in their parenting and how they're approaching kids. That's really going to be something we should look at later. Let's keep going with the sections though, and then come back to that one. There is Sunday Styles, raw milk, no vaccines, non-GMO, and she's doing her own research. Maha Moms, that's Make America Healthy Again, joined the chat. So that's an interesting topic, again, talking about where our government is going. There was an article on the bottom of the Sunday section, if you saw real quickly, when organic baby formula meets Kennedy. So that's, and then if you saw Sree talking about AI and Make America Healthy Again, the reports that their big report on Making America Healthy was riddled with AI hallucinations and bad citations.
Yep, and then they issued a new report which had again similar issues. So
yeah,
that's what we're seeing with the impact of using AI.
The book review is a focus on summer reading. So if folks want to look for a good book to crawl up with, you can find it here in the book review. We'll take a look at it later. And then the New York Times Magazine, I'm trying to get a sense of what this cover is. The headline, the quote at the top, I cannot get through a day. But at the bottom, Canada offers medically assisted death to patients without a terminal illness. Is that
Whoa.
kindness or cruelty? That is interesting.
And Hanson has Canada connection. So talk about what you know about this, if anything.
Well, I don't know anything about this particularly, but I can speak specifically to what's going on in Canada with what has been happening with this current administration and the threats to become the 51st state. And it's been very interesting for me. My parents, who love coming down to the States and have always sort of considered themselves sort of American at heart, don't want to. They're afraid to come. They're afraid to cross the border. And for me, as somebody who grew up in Canada, you can't tell from my accent. I was born in England, but grew up in Canada. You can't tell from either of my accents. It's a really interesting time that Canada, that has existed so comfortably under the shield, protection, and affluence of America, and now is being forced into an existential crisis and say, actually, we got to get our crap together now, because we cannot rely on this ally any longer. And so it's really forcing them to face their own barriers within the country and ask themselves, who are we going to become now? And it's quite disconcerting for them as well. But it's also profoundly interesting for me as a journalist and somebody who comes from there to think about the kind of changes that are going to happen, that it's not going to be business as usual in that country anymore either.
It's not just Canada. Our friends in Europe are feeling the same way. Long-time ally feeling abandoned.
And if you have to take a contrarian position on all this, both of these, Europe and Canada, have managed to build beautiful welfare sort of states with amazing medical care and all the things that America doesn't necessarily have. But they've been able to do it because they don't have to spend as much on military, right? And so they've taken that dividend and invested in the people, which is wonderful. But Trump would say it's because of America's protective umbrella and you've been able to do that. And it's time for you now to pony up. And Canada is also facing that from a budgetary point of view, that they've got to start reinvesting in their military, and something is going to have to be sacrificed along the way. So I think we'll see some profound societal changes in these places as well.
I was hoping we were done with the 51st state stuff, but just this week, in the talk of this kind of ridiculous idea of the Golden Dome that can cover an entire continent, he's offering Canada kind of free coverage of this dome that would fight off missiles that would come from other countries if they become the 51st state. You've lived in Israel. You know about the Iron Dome. That's a small place. It's not covering an entire continent.
No, I think there's a lot of fantasies right now, and it's definitely a reshuffling of the decks in terms of international relations. That Canada can no longer look to America in a trustful way and say, we're going to get through this together. So it'll be interesting to see the alliances that come out of this, the unusual alliances that come out of this, as Canada thinks about where their bread is being buttered, because it can't be America as default any longer.
And there would not be a full-term prime ministership for Mark Carney if it weren't for Donald Trump, because they were losing in all the polls. The Liberals were losing until Donald Trump started this up.
And that's the existential threat. I mean, there was a Trump light who was going to come to power in Canada because there was so much disaffection with Justin Trudeau. But because of this threat, Canadians came together. Even French separatists in Quebec who don't like the federal government realized that they were much better off with a Canadian government than some kind of weird American sovereignty over them. And so it brought everybody together. Sadly, that has been the case for Canada generally, that they've been defining themselves in terms of the relationship with America for decades or centuries, and now they've got to think it through differently, which I think is actually quite positive in terms of where that country is going.
We saw, Neil showed us a headline from the Polish elections. For some reason, CPAC, the conservative political committee and movement here in the US, had a Poland edition. And Kristi Noem was out there campaigning for the Trump-like pro-Putin candidate there. I mean, we know the reasons why, but that's also a reality of this, how America is affecting other elections. We saw in an election that would have gone in a different direction in Australia as well, thanks to Trump. He's not having the positive impact he thinks he's having. What else is in the paper, Neil?
He's having an impact, at least, but going in the other direction. A few other articles. This is still in the international section. Here's an interesting piece. India-Pakistan air war ended after 4 days, but the water war still rages.
Yeah, they're fighting over a treaty that allows access to water. And this is, I think, emblematic of where we're going. And Hanson knows this, having covered the world, that the fight for water in the new climate change world is going to be a big part of how international relations is shaped.
Yeah, when I was in the Middle East, obviously in Israel, the water wars between who controlled, say, the Jordan River, for example, with the Palestinians and Syria and Lebanon and Israel was really interesting. And I once did a story about the Dead Sea, which is the lowest point on the planet, has now plummeted in terms of its levels because it's less water going into the Dead Sea because so much is being diverted to Israeli agriculture. So this is definitely, it's not oil as much, it's water now that's going to define international conflict and relations.
And you need a lot of water.
We don't actually. Sorry, Sree. We don't actually have to go overseas to find these issues. Not far from where Hanson is, in Washington State, there's the Columbia River Treaty between the U.S. and Canada that is also coming into play, particularly around the U.S.-Canadian relations and the issues there. That treaty is very important for Washington State, for energy production, for the dams, for salmon, etc. There's a lot. Water is a huge issue.
Well observed, and our snowpack is lower than ever right now, and so we rely on that hydroelectricity for our clean energy and our Teslas and everything else, and so all that is being called into question right now.
By the way, there was an important global red line about global warming that we are going to cross much sooner than we thought. There was an idea that this rise in temperature that's going to happen would be by 2040. Then it was 2030, and now they're saying it's going to happen in a couple of years, and that's kind of the point of no return that we are going to see. LL says Trump's impact on has been internationally poisonous, and that's certainly an issue. Arlene is watching. She says, from enjoying the show from her rent-stabilized apartment in Uptown Manhattan. She was in the New York Times, featured in the real estate section about her rent-controlled apartment, and we talked about a stabilized apartment. We talked about her. We had her on the show.
You were the guest.
Yeah, Dr. Tachi says this is probably exactly what Canada needed to deeper forge its own identity away from the grasp of the U.S. That's what you were saying too, Hanson.
Yeah, there was more free trade between Canada and the United States than among the provinces in Canada. There were so many trade barriers, which was what Carney's trying to address now. So a lot of deep tissue work that has never been done is being done in Canada now.
Yeah. So I'm showing this two-page, the centerfold, Sree. This is that article, Shadow of Evil Haunts a Quaint Enclave in Berlin. The quote, "I want to know what happened here in my house. It's intimidating to hear about families drowning themselves in the Krum Lanka or hanging in the attic, but you can't move forward with silence." That's Suzanne Gutler, Wright, a teacher of disabled children who moved to this neighborhood with her family in 2000.
And it turns out that there were rich women wearing fur coats that had been stolen from Jewish families during, in the height of Hitler. And then when the Soviets were coming, many of those Nazi families and others kind of hanged themselves or jumped in the river and died, the whole entire families, because they were worried about the repercussions. There's a film that I've been wanting to see called, I think it's called A Quiet Zone, about life at the home of the head of one of the concentration camps, and how the kind of bucolic life of the family while horrors are happening just in the rest of the compound.
It's a powerful film. I've seen it. It's great.
This will be great online, I'm sure. If you see how many pictures they're showing in the print edition, I'm sure that the online it looks really good. We'll definitely want to take a look at that.
By the way, the correct title of that movie is Zone of Interest.
That's right.
They talk about a quiet zone for the family. Yeah.
There's another international article about voting and democracy, why empowering Mexico's voters could undercut its democracy.
Oh, wow.
This is the caption: in Mexico City on Wednesday, distributing pamphlets on candidates in Sunday's judicial elections. And then this is
And
the
of course,
article
the
about that.
president there has been standing up to Trump in a good way.
Yes. And then this is the article about that library in Vermont. You may need a passport along with a library card. And if you see that tape, that's the border that cuts through the middle of the library, intentionally done so. It was intentionally built on the border as per a philanthropist's instruction. The national section, this is the, again, this article about Maryland hitting a conservation goal early. So I want to juxtapose that. So you were talking about we're going to hit a climate change, the average temperature earlier than expected, but Maryland is making some progress apparently on conservation. And this is actually interesting. We're telling one story. This is from the Times. One story from every U.S. state, and we'd love to hear from you. We're looking for stories of people, groups, or organizations that are fixing environmental problems from the state level down to the backyard. 50 states, 50 fixes, and they have a QR code. I have to say, sir, this is the first time that I've seen the Times promote a series like this and have a QR code in the middle of the text to say, "Send us your stories." Do you remember?
I don't recall seeing that. Yeah,
very interesting.
And I'm trying to see where the link goes on there. It goes 50 states and 50 fixes.
Let's put that bigger. Let's see. Show that again.
Yeah, 50 states and 50 fixes.
Interesting.
Now more than ever, environmental solutions may seem out of reach, but they're happening all over the country. This year, we'll be highlighting one thing that's working in every state. Living car-free in Arizona on purpose and happily. Wow, I'm surprised because out here in the West, I'm in LA, in California, Arizona, Nevada, you need a car to get around.
Do they have other stories?
In Washington and around Seattle, Hanson has traveled in very interesting ways to work. Including
I bike all the time when I can. If I didn't have kids, I wouldn't have a car. And when I go to LA, I bike a lot. Last time I was in LA before in December, I biked to LAX. I just love biking in LA for some reason.
You bike in LA?
I did. I actually once took my folding bike on the plane and biked everywhere. I didn't take one car during the whole trip.
Wow.
LA is actually a bike-friendly city if you know where you're going.
Wow, that's amazing. You've also commuted by kayak.
That's right. I used to. It was ostentatious
Seattle,
and a bit pretentious, but yeah, I used to kayak. It took longer to kayak to work than it did to walk. But I just love the idea of being on the water, going to the University of Washington. Yeah.
Here's Wayne Camadoy, who's a designer at the New York Times and a friend of the show, who's sent us lots of specially designed sections in advance and things like that. It says certain articles get QR codes to digital if there's a call out to readers or additional content not in print. So good to know that that's been going on. Thank you, Wayne. We appreciate that. Ellen's watching from New York City. Thank you, Ellen, for watching as well. Folks, we have just a couple of minutes more with Hanson. So Neil, just show us a couple of, if there's anything else that caught your eye as you're going through this.
Sure. Nothing else in the front section. More about Trump and Musk. This is a continuation of that and the CPAC conference. So yeah, that's the front section. Unless we want to take a closer look at anything that we reviewed quickly, either on the business or the opinion section, why don't you just take a quick look at this Vanishing American Family story? Sorry, this in the opinion, just to see what they're trying to say with that. And then we can bring the show to a close.
And I was trying to find the story that I saw last night in the Times about knowledge work and entry-level positions going away for young people coming out of college. And that's something I've been looking at the University of Washington as well, with AI changing how people are hiring now. It's quite devastating from an economic point of view for young people trying to figure out where they're going to land after they leave the university.
And you're working on this issue at the University of Washington.
Yeah, so I'm an advisor to the vice provost of continuing education, and we're just trying to look at it right now and figure out what is meaningful education if this is changing so quickly.
Why do millennials dread having babies?
Yeah,
part of it
so the
is
teaser. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Sree.
I was going to say part of it is obviously the economic situation, how much harder it is to own a home. And everything else, but then there are other issues, including why the therapy generation is taking a pass on being parents.
And that's so I didn't understand, just from that teaser what they were getting at. When you look at the actual story, the first pull quote, when the fear of failing our children outweighs the desire to bear
Wow.
them.
Wow.
Wow.
So it's looking at these three kind of subheads. One, they mess you up. I guess talking about children, I'm assuming. Two, man hands-on misery to man, and obviously the non-gendered version of that. But there is that concept of generational trauma, and if they're concerned about passing that on. And then three, get out as early as you can and don't have any kids yourself.
Wow.
Very dark.
Do you think Sree, given that you'll become a grandfather? Do you expect to become a grandfather? I don't know if my kids will ever have kids.
Well, who knows? You cannot predict all of that. But one thing, speaking of AI and how the world has changed, trying to get my kids to get driver's licenses,
They don't want
it was really hard. They were not interested in learning how to drive, though one of them is now. But it was just really difficult. And
that's because they're New Yorkers, Sree.
Yeah. No, exactly.
Hanson, how old are your kids again?
My kids are 14 and 17, and one of them is getting their license right now. The other one's so obsessed with cars, he wished he had his license as of now.
And mine is 12. So I'm we're in the kind of three different groups that we're talking about. Sree, it's been a while since we've seen you, so I just want to say congratulations on two graduates in your house now.
Yes, we're very blessed that the two grandparents who are still alive were able to come from India, the two grandfathers, and attend graduations at both Duke University and Boston University. We were thrilled to have that intergenerational connection. So we're very pleased about that. So thank you.
Yeah.
And congratulations to you and Rupert. To me, that's success. As a parent,
getting the kids to graduate. Yeah,
way.
that's certainly something. What we're going to do now is just take Hanson offline for a moment, and Neela and I are going to do some housekeeping. Then we're going to bring Hanson back to talk about the film and do one more push, and then we're going to wrap up. So Hanson, we're going to bring you right back. Neil, what a great show. Hanson was terrific, and the connection that you and he have had being in the same spaces, working on these issues about civil rights and the future of America are so important. I'm so glad we were able to do that. And we should also talk about your other show that you do.
Yes, we have the other show that we do, and that's why I was particularly interested in that article about the therapy generation. I was really curious about what was going on with that. Of course, the show that I host is Shining Light on Shadows, a candid conversation about mental health. And our last episode, we air that 2 times a month, the second and fourth Thursdays. But we were thrilled to have Aisha Sultan as our guest. She has a new series on PBS, Things We Don't Talk About. And she talked about not only that series, but her own approach and her experience with therapy and mental health, and what motivated her to do that series. So it was great. And I want to say, I don't have the card ready yet, but our friend Jonathan is going to be the guest on our next episode. So not this Thursday, but a week from Thursday. So we have an extra week to promote it, June 12th. He's going to be talking about mental health among seniors. It came up in a conversation in an email with him. And then I said, well, Jonathan, would you be willing to be a guest? And he said, well, I think his email was something akin of, well, I'm a senior and I have thoughts on mental health. Yeah, sure.
And we also have a great guest next week on this show. We're going to tell everybody 8:30 a.m. Eastern time. Alison Kosick is going to be here. She's an author. Many of you know her from ABC News and CNN, and she's going to talk about what's up with women and money, how to do all the financial stuff you've been avoiding. And she's an international anchor and a business correspondent. So that's 8:30 a.m. Eastern time next week. So please join us for that. And with that, let's bring Hanson Hosein back onto the show.
Yeah. Hanson,
I'm back.
It was great to have you on the show. And as Sree mentioned, our being able to connect around the work that you've done in Selma was really meaningful for me personally. both in the conversation we had before, I guess last week or so, but then also as I reflected on that and looked at some of the pictures, watched some of the documentary. It was really great to see the people that I've met with, the stories that I've told, brought to life in your documentary, and see them walking across the bridge. I personally how profound it is to be on that bridge and to walk across, whether you're with a big group of people, with dignitaries, or whether you're just walking alone. You can't escape the history that's there, and you captured it wonderfully
I
in
appreciate
that piece.
I appreciate that, Neil. I mean, Charles Malden had actually called the Edmund Pettus Bridge Black America's Wailing Wall, or the Western Wall, which is the sacred space in Jerusalem for Jewish people. And so, yeah, it is a profoundly moving experience to be able to walk across it.
Folks, we're going to have Hanson talk about the film in just a moment, but I wanted to just show a comment from LL, who says this is a great show. The first time that he's caught this show, happened to be a day off today. Thank you for watching. LL used to deliver the New York Times in the 70s and 80s. I miss the days when their Sunday paper was huge and about $1.50. Those are the good old days, LL says. So thank you, LL, for joining us. And yes, really a great show today. So give us your
note, Sree, before we bring Hanson on, I want to just tell LL and others, if you want to be added to our mailing list to get notifications about shows, send me an email, neil@digimentors.group, neil@digimentors.group, and we can add you to our mailing list. We only send out 1 or 2 emails per show, just to make sure you get the links, etc. But we have some great guests, and we'd love to have you come back, LL, for another show to watch. So, Sree, I'll let you set up.
So 8:30 a.m. Eastern time on Sunday. So please join us, and we have some great guests coming through the summer. But let's go back to Hanson. Hanson, thank you so much for spending your Sunday morning with us, very early, 5:30 a.m. your time, and tell us about American Dignity and why people should make the effort if they're in LA or New York to see it in person. And also get the word out to their friends so they can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Sree. This was a joy to both you and Neil. Thank you for making this happen. American Dignity, when I set out to make it, I said I wanted to tell the most profound, thoughtful, emotional story I could that connects 60 years ago in the civil rights movements of what's happening right now and how we lead now. So in a way, it's both an emotionally moving story about 2 incredible leaders, but it is ultimately a visual leadership essay about what do we do now to bring people together to meet the challenge that we're facing now, and how are we going to rebuild after everything has come falling down, because I think a lot of it is going to change, and trust and collaborate at scale again as Americans. And that's what American Dignity is. American Dignity at its heart is American democracy at its best, and hence the title. So I hope you join me. It's still playing in Los Angeles at the Laemmle 7 in North Hollywood for a few more days, but I'll be in New York on June 20th for the premiere there with Charles Douglas from Colin Power for a great Q&A and be playing there. And after that, we hope to make it available as publicly as possible, because by then we will have qualified for Oscar eligibility. And then we hope to be in Los Angeles for those awards when time comes. I don't know; it's a bit of a crapshoot, but it was really important to me to hit that bar with that level of storytelling at the point that I am right now in my professional life. And I'm so grateful to be able to share this with you, Sree and Neil. And I love the fact that we have that point of confluence in terms of the work you're doing with the John Lewis Foundation.
And Dr. Tachi says, "What an amazing show!" Thank you, Hanson. And we're just delighted that we could bring you and share your story with the world. Thank you very much, everybody. We'll see you next Sunday, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, with Allison Kosek, who will be here talking about women, money, and so much more. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you.
Thank you very much. And Naomi says, thanks for your insightful perspective and important information. And LL said he just bookmarked the page. So thank you for that. Appreciate it. See you next week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.